Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis of the Prayers of Folly podcast. I'm joined again by Logos. This is unusual for me to do a Saturday stream on an off week when I'm not doing the roundtable, but that's because it worked better for Logos this way. And one of the things we've been talking about behind the scenes, which I thought would be useful for all my listeners, is the current state of the left. So after Trump's second term, the collapse of the Biden administration, the collapse of the woke, the infighting. So when I say collapse of the left, this is what I mean. I mean, one, the infighting. There's so much infighting. There's a crisis for narrative. You know, who's to blame for Trump's second term victory? The sense that the woke is not they're questioning whether that should even be the Democratic Party's flagship platform, like it was under Biden and Obama. It's so bad. It's just so bad. They're even questioning that, right? And so, but also Trump's complete ascendancy. I mean, the given where they thought they were with Biden, they thought they were really high, really powerful, and then they've lost so much ground. Now they're still fighting, of course. So Trump has been trying to defund these universities, which is sort of like cutting the head off the snake. That's where all these people come from, and they are putting up a fight. But that's not. It's more legal, right? Not so much political party activity. It still seems to me pretty scattered. And then the commentators, the talking heads, they're all kind of all over the place. I haven't been following it as much. I just on my own X feed, I've noticed that the right just doesn't argue with the left anymore. I'm like, well, that's interesting. That my thought was that means that the left is just in turmoil. So there's not a whole lot of gain to be gained by that. And then I asked you, Logos, and you said, yeah, let me tell you about it. So why don't you tell us about where the left's at right now, Logos?
Yeah. To your Twitter point, a lot of the reasons why that's not happening is because the left ditched it and went to blue sky. And funny enough, there are some harrowing stories coming out of blue sky. Like Mark Cuban, I think, was one of the people to say something about this, where he's just like, we all went to blue sky to avoid, like, the insane politics and chill and talk about gardening and whatever stuff. And, we want to, quote, just be good people. And it's turned into like a constant circling firing squad. So even some lefties in blue sky are getting absolutely tired of it. And so who knows, maybe they'll come back to Twitter and you'll start having the usual arguments you used to have. I don't know. Now, to get to the broader conversation, taking, this question of social media is kind of like a starting act, I guess. The way I think of it, there's three spheres where there's a lot of fighting going on within left-wing politics right now. The first sphere is cultural. So why did the left lose the working class? Why is the left seeming to cater toward more urban, educated, elite-style administrative personalities? How do you win them back? Do you want to win them back? What does winning them back look like? What should the left give up for messaging, basic policy, whatever to do it? That's one battle. The next battle is going to be economic and largely a matter of like state and urban policy. This is where you've got like the Ezra Klein abundance movement versus, the usual interests. We'll get to that in a minute. And the last sphere is going to be more on the vein of political activism. So this is where you're getting at the question of what does it mean to be a political activist? What should the left do to take political power? Who should they make coalition with? What kinds of behavior should and shouldn't be tolerated in political activism? This sphere is very much characterized by, there was this thing called the Un-F America tour, and it basically imploded within like less than a week, I think. And Destiny did a whole bunch of commentary on it, talked to the person who hosted the thing, try to talk to the people that basically shut it down due to squabbling. That was a whole saga. So let's go through each of these one at a time. Is there any one that you want to start with first?
We could just go in the order that you delivered them.
Okay. So first question is, the biggest demographic talked about is young men, 18 to 29-year-olds. The second biggest demographic talked about is the working class, and the joke that the Democrats are no longer the party of the working class. And Sean Head did that hilarious video responding to her responders. She's like, Democrats are no longer the party of the working class, and I think it was Hutch was like, well, what does that mean, party of the working class? And then she was just like laughing so hard because 5 years ago everybody knows what working class means. And now suddenly this happened. It's like, oh, I don't know what really is working class anyway, right? And that kind of tells you like where this dynamic is, where this battle is heading. You've got two factions. One that says, hey, there's no reason that, young men should, avoid our party like the plague. What is it that we're doing that's like really making them uncomfortable, really like, making them our enemy here? And how does that relate to like traditional working class union types in, Rust Belt states? Swinging for Trump all of a sudden. Like, what's going on here? There's something about our cultural politics, our image, our messaging that is just counterproductive to the image we've wanted to have for ourselves of the whole union supporting, factory working supporting thing going on here. And we have to decide, like, are we going to fix it or are we going to double down on where we're at? And we can't do it. So one of the big penultimate like moments in this fight that's happened recently is David Hogg. People probably know about him. He was in that school shooting. He survived it. He's been like a anti-gun kind of activist ever since, kind of making waves to the Democratic Party, doing a lot of lawsuits, doing a lot of stuff. After the election, he was kind of, I don't know exactly what he was promoted to. I don't know if it was like a vice chair position or like a consultancy position. DNC stuff's kind of complicated, where you look at a label and you think it means one thing, but it means something else. Either way, he was promoted to something really interesting, and he was going to advise the Democratic Party on like how to start appealing to guys. He went on the tour. He started going on podcasts. He went on Bill Maher, and he said something like, Democrats need to win guys by helping them get laid. Basically, is like the cheap version of what he said. He said other stuff too, but that was like the highlight everybody took. Now recently, Hogg was like ousted, I think, after he made some comment about like representation, where there's a certain number of seats that have to be allocated for women, but there's this weird loophole where like trans and non-binary people don't count in that. And I think a disproportionate amount of non-binary people, like women, try to take advantage of that loophole. And like he was pointing out a lot of stuff, and like they like ousted him, they kicked him out. And so a lot of people have been talking about that. The next thing that people were talking about is like this $20 million like study that Democrats wanted to do for young guys and figure out like why they leave their party, what's going on. And they came up with some of the most obvious stuff that anybody could have told you for free. It was absolutely crazy. And so the joke is, they paid $20 million that they used mostly to rent out a mansion in the Hamptons or wherever they were and have dinners with caviar and lobster and talk about how good they are. And then also the study was produced stating the obvious, right? And that's also been kind of like a cultural flashpoint, talking about how out of touch the Democratic Party is. But the real issue, going back to like Hogg versus the DNC, is there really is this tension of like, we have to fix our messaging, who the cultural appeals to, etc., versus no, it's fine, right? It's fine if the DNC kind of becomes a macrocosm of that. What was it? It was like the Socialists of America conference years ago. You remember that, Todd, right? Where they had like
yeah.
Point of order. Everybody was saying point of order for their own little special thing. That's what like the DNC is becoming. And like that's one of the reasons guys like hate it, right? And Hogg's trying to like fix it. And they're like, no. So that's kind of like the first sphere. Do you want to stop and talk about this before we move on to the second one?
So before we move on, like you said, this is obvious why this is happening. So what has happened is that for the Democrats, working class means white, and all these people hate white people. That's really it. A good video where this sort of pivot happens is V Radio, an anarchist who was some of the Occupy stuff way back in 2011, was saying that they pivoted this all to race. And then he has a really excellent video about how the 1% is called. I think it's called How the 1% Destroyed Occupy Wall Street. And he's like, yeah, they made it all about race. And then, of course, it's no longer about class, divide and conquer, and then that's it. The other thing is there was some British Marxist guy that I think it was like within the last 10 years. And that was when the term gay space luxury communism got big. And I kid you not, this is like about 10 years ago, 8 years ago. He was talking to some other Marxist guys, and he's like, the incels are claiming that they can't get laid because of capitalism. And remember, for this guy, everything is capitalism's fault. He said, no, it's the incels' fault. And I'm like, well, you're not a communist then. This is clearly capitalism's fault. One, it's always capitalism's fault, right? So right there at that moment, you can start to see the pivot where they're now not seeing these systemic problems affecting young men as systemic problems of capital, but they're playing the frame game that Jordan Peterson does. It's your problem, bucko.
Clean your room, sort yourself out. Exactly. Right. And that's it. So yeah, so you mentioned race, and I was definitely gonna mention sex. You transitioned there for me. And that's a really, really big one. Like a lot of the working class, like union workers and stuff, they're probably not incels, most of them. You know, they get out, they talk to people, they're holding down state jobs. Most of them are probably fine. Um, but that dimension's still a problem. But what is happening is I don't know that working class is associated with white necessarily. I think the problem is working class is associated with man, and you're seeing this in the demographic play out in the election, right? So maybe in the past working class was associated with white, and so Democrats had a big lead with, like, Hispanics and other minorities. But we saw Hispanics flip. We saw their lead in African Americans, like, start to flip. They still kept it, but it's going to start trending rightward if they're not careful. And I think the big problem is, what seems to be the commonality here is men and men's issues. And we can talk about men's particular issues. The MRAs have stuff about, like, courts and the draft and stuff like that. But I think the problem is just more basic than that, right? It's like Sean had said, it's like Democrats talk to men, so they pull out Tim Walz, do some cringe ad about carburetors and football, and it just, she said it looked like a man playing a man for Halloween, and that was right. It's like left wing academia and politics are trying to say there's, like, one right way to be a man, and men aren't having it, right? And it's this whole, the force is female, men are good cheerleaders, right? This whole phenomena being talked about, right? So it's like men are good men when they support women, and um men want women, or women want men who go to college, and men are having a crisis in K-12 education right now, but we're not going to talk about it. And, like, little things like that are just kind of, like, bubbling up. And then also with regard to working class stuff, I mean, let's just state the obvious, right? Democrat uh, Democrats basically are kind of like the HR person that just, like, you can't say that. That's phobic. That's racist. That's whatever, right? Think about the Gillette commercial. And it's, half the commercial is guys trying to police other guys' behavior. Man, that's not cool. You can't say that. Can't do that. Don't hit on that woman. Whatever. And working class guys are just like, we're not that way, dude. We're not going to police our bros' behavior. Maybe we'll, shake our head disapprovingly if they go a bit too far or whatever. But, like, we get it. So like, we like locker room talk, basically. Stop nagging us all the time. Basically, we don't want to go to a party where that political party is like the worst of our wives on their worst day, 24/7. That's like the broader cultural issue that I and other people, even in this study, somewhat seem to get from what's going on. And so that's the working class dynamic.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the second one now.
Okay, so the second one, this one's really interesting. On top of the electoral slide that's happening, Ezra Klein, New York Times reporter, pretty left-wing, kind of a neoliberally type, not really a socialist or something, much more in favor of capitalism, but the right kind of capitalism, if you know what I mean. He has been sounding the alarm, because if you're looking at who's moving away from what states and areas and to where, it looks like, if things are on track as they are by the next census, Democrats are looking to lose 10 electoral college seats. And he is not happy about that. And him and somebody else wrote a book called Abundance, and they've been on the warpath. And their basic argument is this: blue states have good policies that people want to live in, right? They have decent, good, solid wages. They've got public transportation. They've got, good insurance programs and safety nets and stuff that people want. They upkeep their environment better, whatever it is. Blue cities and states are magnets for people to come in. But what happens is, because everybody wants to move there, things get so expensive, and it's unsustainable given the current policies. And so he's gone on a rampage about how the left, the environmental factions, the bureaucratic factions, the unions, everybody's got their hands in the cookie jar, right? They are fighting structural and physical progress that will keep things affordable, keep things cheap, keep the areas being able to attract more people, whether it's zoning laws for housing, whether it's the fact that like California has spent like 10 times the cost per foot meter, whatever unit is, as China for building their electric, rail, whether it's all the snafus and processes you have to go through to get like internet to like rural areas, you name it. He's been sounding the alarm on how absolutely crazy government has been in these areas of stifling development, making it impossible for Democrats to keep their electoral base. In response to that, it was funny. I think it was, what was it? Was it Sam Cedar or was it David Packman? I don't remember. Maybe it was both of them. Ezra Klein goes on and starts trying to like make his case and argue and blah 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 blah. And he's just stating the basic case that like regulations are too tight in ways that are hurting people. We should look at that and address it where they can. And they hear deregulate like a dog whistle, and like their heads just explode. They're like, "What do you mean? What kind of libertarian talking points are these? You can't just deregulate. You can't trust business. Of course, you have to have like legalese and stuff every step of the way. What if the corporations do anything wrong?" And Ezra's just like, "Listen, I'm all for having like legal protection. So if something happens, damages are done, go to the courts. But we're talking about like thought crime levels of preemptive protections here that are stifling any kinds of development. Here's some concrete ways in which it's happening." And those discussions were fascinating to watch. I mean, if anybody listening here hasn't seen those, just go watch those. You'll get a really, really good idea of like where it's going. Ezra Klein is wanting to not necessarily get rid of all the government regulation stuff, but he's wanting to grease the wheels a bit so people can move through the process quicker, easier, with decent oversight, and get things done at a cheap level. And you see various left-wing channels. He's talked to various people on the left. They have slightly different disagreements, but most of them are just like, well, if we make it easier for business, like here's how poor Black people are going to suffer, right? And they'll cite like things that happened like shortly after Eisenhower, where highways were put through their neighborhoods or certain factories were put close to where the poor people lived and stuff like that. Stuff that really happened. I get it, right? They have like an instinct to want to protect these people that have like lower levels of like political advocacy. Sure. But they're like trying to freeze time in the hypothetical these people could be hurt. And it's causing like this massive schism with people that want to like save electoral politics.
Yeah. So it's sort of the same problem as, say, over vaccinating children for like, say, smallpox, when it's not really that likely they're ever going to get smallpox these days. It's like, well, you're hurting, you're overdoing it, right? Is that kind of what you're kind of the concern there?
Yes and no. To put it more like this, it's like, suppose there is a thing that everybody agrees that children need to be vaccinated against. It's like, okay, trivially, here's one thing we can all agree on. Well, in order to get the vaccine rolled out, this vaccine needs to be put through 10 subcommittees, and that's going to take like 3 years. It's already been approved for market. Like the research is done, the FDA is done, everything's done. But before our state can use it, we have to have like its own disparate impact committee to take a look at it to see if there's some reason it could hurt a poor community more than a rich one or whatever. We have to do an environmental impact analysis on the materials used to create the vaccine, even though it's safe.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So it's more like, so let me put it this way. I think what Klein is getting at with what you just said is if you keep adding these regulatory roadblocks, bottlenecks to business, they're just going to find ways to just completely circumvent those things. So any of the purported good that would have been acquired by compliance is gone because they just don't comply. They just find some workaround. Is that it?
Or more scarily enough, everybody just leaves, right? They want to comply, but nobody can afford to comply. So housing doesn't get built, keeping up with demand. Businesses can't afford to keep their workers, so they have to go because their workers leave because the rent's too high and the business can't pay them enough. Business can't even afford their own rents because rent's going up because land isn't being developed for more commercial property. So, they have to keep jacking up their prices to afford their increasing rents, and they're just not seeing the margins to do it. All sorts of things happen. And it's causing them electoral politics. Like I opened with, the Democrats are afraid they're going to be losing 10 electoral politics by default to red states because people are just moving with their feet.
Yeah, no, they are. And then, of course, you'll hear it from like conservatives in red states that liberals are fleeing their bad policies to bring their bad policies to our states. So you'll hear that. So it's like this boomerang of crap.
It's interesting too, because some states maybe that's right, and some states not so much. So they've done research on this for like Idaho, because Idaho is a state where people really, really say that all these Californians are moving up here. Well, they've done profiles on most of people moving up from California, and they're mostly all like the red Republicans from California that move up to Idaho. Now, California Republicans are a bit different than other Republicans, so mea culpa, there's that. But it's definitely not like the bluest of the blue people. What I've noticed
Okay.
is when like the bluest of the blue people that really champion the policies that are sinking these things, when they move to other really blue friendly, really urban areas that are as much like them as possible. When
So like for example, if you're from say Seattle, and you want to go to Texas, you go to Austin.
Bingo, exactly right.
No, yeah. So I mean, the problem here is that there's really no good solution to the problem that he's looking at, because on the one hand, Klein, I mean, on the one hand, you want to okay, let's just bring it up. Diseconomies of scope. This was one of our talking points 5 years ago, Logos, and diversity is not our strength from 2020. Not all, but a lot of these extra layers of things don't add tangible value to the real goal of making sure corporate actors don't act with malfeasance. And that is a problem nobody wants to talk about.
Oh, that's absolutely true. That's definitely true. I mean, if you think about each of these subcommittees meant to look at like racial impacts, environmental impacts, all these different impacts, it ends up adding. Now, it looks like what it's adding is linearly. But really think about like the mathematical equation, like D equals RT, right? The distance you travel is the rate times the time. Well, let's suppose there's some rate. Well, no, let's do this. Rate is distance divided by time, right? And so as you keep adding these committees to keep like linearly increasing time, so let's say each committee takes like another 2 years to approve something. So first the environmental impact committee takes 2 years, and then the racial impact committee takes 2 years, and then what you're looking at is the thing you want to do. Let's call that the distance divided by the time. It's going to be the rate at which stuff gets done. Even though time's increasing linearly, its impact on the final result is decreasing rationally, like an asymptote, and things are trending toward like zero as far as how quick things are getting done. It's one of those like, it's like one of those Tim Poolisms, right? No snowflake's responsible for the avalanche. It's like, well, my committee only takes so and so time. I can't be the problem. It's like, yeah, maybe you're not, but the other 50 committees might be, you think? And that's a diseconomies of scope issue. It's when you look at these things all at once, all in context, they're really bad, even if each individual one could have like meritorious reasons for being there to some extent. It's just gotten too bad. And to add quickly, like you see this problem in like K through 12 education all the time, where let's suppose you got school districts and they're trying to figure out how to like make the lowest scoring students do better. And so they have all these like schemes with like culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogies and, multicultural this and that, and, all sorts of programs and stuff. And let's suppose you have like Asian parents who are like in these school districts, and they're looking at this going on and they're like, wait, so my kid's like learning like 30% less math because just to get these other kids on board, you're devoting all this time to lecture and stuff like that. And they're like, nah, we're out. And so they flee the school districts, or they will stay in the school district, but like pay money to put their kid in private school. And so like a lot of the, like the left likes to pretend like most of the push and the impetus for the private school movement's Christian. I don't think so these days. I think the biggest impetus for like the private school choice movement would be like from Asian Americans who want their kids to be competitive in college and are disgusted with like some of the diseconomies of scope issue we see in K through 12, where in trying to like cater to every single hypothetical problem that a multicultural student body could have, the schools are just getting bogged down and they can't do the one thing they're supposed to do: ensure excellence and ensure a high level of outcomes by the time they're ready to transfer to college. And so like K through 12 is like a microcosm of what you see going on in urban politics all over America.
So basically, what you're telling me is, Logos, let me tell you how to not build your RPG character so you sink all your points into skills that don't add up in a long enough time frame.
Yeah, it's kind of like building a D&D character. And normally you have like dump stats. But imagine that you have this committee evaluating your character and saying, well, what if you have to take this kind of save in the campaign? And that type of save you fail could have a disparate impact on audience members X, Y, and Z matching your campaign. So we're going to need you to take points out of some of your highest stats and put them in those dump stats to lower the probability, like you don't fail the save or whatever. Um, it's like that. Yeah, you're taking stuff that should be your optimal thing, and you're trying to shore up all your weaknesses instead of like being efficient and focusing on your strengths.
Okay, we have a super chat directly related to this, so I'm guessing that's for both of us, Logos, but I'll let you answer it first. Seamus O'Blaine for €5. Thank you very much. How long until contradictions and resource waste, loss of ability, and corruption/complexity hit hard? Will it be smooth, steeped, or off a cliff?
Unfortunately, smooth. I think. Well, actually, that's not true. It One of two things can happen, and it depends on the short run how we handle certain policies. Um, Ordinarily, ceteris paribus on certain issues I'll talk about in a minute, I would say smooth, because what happens is you have all this waste and it makes places impossible to live, which forces people to move. And then as people move, you see like real estate starting to be valuable. Then you start seeing like real estate developers start gobbling stuff up as people move to certain places. They get their hooks in politics. They like the labyrinths. They like the stuff. They like to hold on to their value and keep it up as people want to move these places, right? And the cancer like slowly spreads as people, and until it basically overwhelms the system. Where this might be all at once, and where we're reaching a breaking point that just can no longer be looked away from. Long time watchers of this channel probably know exactly what I'm going to say, and the answer is student loans. Recently, Trump just gutted a bunch of Biden's SAVE Act stuff, which was his last gasp ability to put duct tape on this problem. So income-based repayment plans have been nothing new, but Biden made them much, much more lenient for, say, families. That's what my friend reported. He has a family, and he was able to count his income as lower because he was like married with a kid than if he would have been single and stuff like that. So there are people trying to navigate certain economic milestones that were like really benefited from SAVE Act policies of Biden and things like that, and Trump just ripped that band-aid off. So student loans have recently come due when they were on hold since COVID, and they're now in play. This double whammy is now making things hit hard at the exact same time Trump is announcing tariffs. Rents are still going up. These problems in these areas are only getting worse. And well, normally, like I said before, the problem would be gradual. The problem happens like in the 2008 collapse earlier. Once you start seeing these gradual problems hit the wall that is debt, and the fact that people can't borrow anymore, they've hit that debt wall. They have to start repaying their debt. The economy is not being conducive to them paying the debt. Now the contradiction has to resolve, and usually like some sort of bankruptcy restructuring resolves it. You have the whole toxic mortgage assets. People lost their houses. People got to keep their houses with special deals from the bank backed by the government. Lots of forgiveness, lots of house losses, it was very, very messy all over the place, but the contradictions resolved itself as best they could. Here, however, we have a unique problem. Again, longtime watchers are going to point out, student loans can't be forgiven in bankruptcy. We have no structure like we did for housing in order to deal with this problem. So once the inflating housing and business costs and other costs start ratcheting it up, it's going to happen slowly until it hits a student loan debt bubble. Unlike credit card debt, unlike a mortgage, unlike things that are backed by assets and can be declared in bankruptcy, where this is going to hit all at once, there's nowhere for it to go, and suddenly this smoothly increasing problem now hits this asymptotic wall, and we don't know what's going to happen next. So how quickly or slowly we transition to that point is going to depend on how bad the student loan problem is. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people that got student loans are increasingly either leaving the labor force or being reasonably employed. So if you look at like mid to upper 30 somethings to 40 somethings, millennials and early millennials that really started, ramping up their student loans, if they made it into a career and they made it into like an upper role, so far they're doing okay. Who are being hit the hardest right now are entry level positions. There have been a lot of articles written recently about how like entry level jobs, due to AI, due to economic certainty, due to a lot of issues, are being absolutely collapsed out. And there are articles talking about how like the unemployment rate for recent college grads is worse than the unemployment rate generally, especially in certain industries, and so on. Those are the people for whom the student loan problem is going to be like really, 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 really bad. And so the analysis is going to be more complicated later. It's not just going to be like student loan havers versus non-student loan havers. It's going to be like student loan havers and where you're at in your career and the assets you've got saved up. But simplifying things down to a lower resolution, yeah, that wall is going to happen for somebody at some point, especially since we haven't fixed how college is done. Republicans will talk about how, yeah, you got to pay off your student loans and college is too expensive. It's like, okay, we got to pay off student loans. College is still too expensive. That hasn't been fixed. It's still too expensive. You've been talking about that for decades. You have basically enough political power to probably fix it. It's not being fixed. And so here's what's going on. Yeah, hopefully that answered it. What do you think?
Well, Seema Sublane said great answer. So, yeah, you did. I'll just add a couple things real quick to what you said, Logos. Smooth, steep draw off a cliff is going to be regionally contingent. So a lot of the heartland territories that got wiped out by globalism, it was kind of steep or off a cliff, right? When the businesses just left and they were just left in the lurch. But I think, like you said, Logos, like, well, when is it going to be too big for the whole country to handle? And yeah, student loan debt might be one of it. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's but the point is, so it sounds like what you're saying, Logos, is that corporations can no longer use, government subsidies of a, university students to reduce the cost of future tech workers, which they're going to replace anyhow with AI. So, whatever, right?
Yeah, they're sure trying.
That or the H-1B visas, right?
Oh, don't get me started.
So to be honest, Logos, what will probably happen is that there won't be a replacement. Like all three legs will break. University will break, H-1B is going to break, AI is going to break, and there's no way to hire enough new people to fill these tech jobs, and it just goes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think of those three things as the legs that have been holding up urban housing, especially, right? Because urban centers are mostly where the tech jobs are, the marketing jobs are, things like that. And as AI has been chipping away at that, as H-1Bs have been chipping away at that, as all sorts of things have been chipping away at that, that foundation's eroding. And so once student loans plus housing costs meet a critical mass where people just cannot finance a debt anymore, things are just going to crumble.
Yeah. Okay. Now you said there was a third category, right?
Yeah, this is good times. So, the Democrats are trying to build a political movement to actually look at flipping districts and electorally solving the issues. I mean, the left is pretty good at protesting, right? They've done all sorts of like the No Kings protests and the protests against ICE just before that, and all sorts of protests. They do it. They get out there, they wave their signs. We're not happy, and they go home, and things just keep marching on in Trump's presidency. That's just the way it is. Now, where the left is trying to say, okay, well, we solve this problem by flipping seats. Now, let me give some context behind this, like Un-F America tour. The person who was the mastermind of this thing, she was part of a political PAC that shortly after Trump won noticed there were going to be some special elections filled for like judges, senators, all sorts of stuff. And she formed a PAC, raised some money, went into some few districts, did a good job, like months before the elections, figuring out who are the people on the ground, what are their issues, who should we run against, the Republican here, just pure tactical scalpel work. And they flipped, I think, all but like one of the elections they were trying to flip. And they had a lot of money left over. They were like super lean, super efficient. It was great. Well, I mean, in terms of like political activism, it was like really, really, strong, the performance. Now, she's looking at this and going, okay, I solved my job. There's no more special elections coming up. I got all this money left over. What do I do with it? Let's go through and start seeing if we can solve like the young men problem, going back to the first sphere of debate we were talking about, not through like democratic messaging, but through like challenging the people who talk to these young men directly. She picked Charlie Kirk. The whole, everybody's seen the memes, the whole change my mind thing on the campuses. Crowder does it, Kirk does it, whatever. Kirk was in the middle of a university tour. So she goes, screw it. Let's take the money. Let's get some social media influencers. Let's get a caravan and let's just follow him along every stop of his tour. And wherever he sets up a tent, we'll set up a tent. We'll have lines of right wingers and other people want to ask us questions and vice versa. And we'll just have like a parallel debate. Maybe once he gets annoyed with us, the parallel debate will be turned into a real debate. And hopefully the influencers we bring can bring the fire and we'll have a good time. And some minds will be changed that ordinarily Democrats wouldn't have even talked to. That sounds great for everybody, right? Okay, until it wasn't great. So they got these influencers. They went to like 2 campus tours, and the whole thing just fell apart. So there are accusations that Black content creators weren't being appropriately represented. One of the content creators, from how I've heard explained to me, staged like a mini coup on the thing, and it turned to this giant cult of personality, like drama fest, and things just tailspinned. This wasn't her fault, she's got a political science degree. She works with PAC. She got people elected. This wasn't her incompetence. This was purely like the social media influencers she invited to bring along this thing and bring publicity and whatever. It was their infighting, their clout chasing, their whatever, their purity spiraling that just derailed the whole thing. So there's 2 lessons to be learned here. And this isn't me saying, that's like Destiny saying this, right? So lesson number 1 is not every left-wing social media influencer is your friend politically. They might talk a good game, but they don't really care about the cause. They don't care about political victories. They're in it for publicity for them, despite the fact that they look like they're on your team. That's a problem. Number 2 is, let's assume these people are genuine. What tanked this thing was like that Socialists of America conference thing we talked about, point of order, cater to my particular thing, right? And so Destiny's been on a rampage going on certain streams with these people that tank the conference and just like jumping in uninvited and just like railing on them. Just like, okay, so we're not meeting your need about X, Y, and Z to your liking. Would you prefer the Republicans to win and do X, Y, and Z to you instead? No. Okay, we need to talk then. Like, where's the point of compromise? Where's the point where you go, Republicans winning is bad enough for me that we're willing to overlook this political purity and work with people who are trying to get things done and moving along and get electoral power so some of my interests can be met. And he's not really getting a good answer as far as I can see, and he's just getting endlessly frustrated by it. And so the philosophical discussion he's been hammering in his sphere of the woods right now is just like, when are we going to give up purity spiraling and approach like real political activism? And it doesn't look like, to his chagrin, that people want to answer that question.
So again, Logos, this goes back to what you said 5 years ago. This is all Disconomies of Scope. Like, it's the same problem as we dealt with the first one. It's the same problem. And the problem is, once you start doing that, it's very difficult to walk it back, because now you have interest groups that are, over my dead body, right? From my cold dead hands. That's what they're going to tell you now. I mean, we know this doesn't work. Lenin didn't do this. Mao didn't do this. I mean, if you really want to have a revolution and take out capital, you don't do this. And even if you're a reformist, like, say, FDR, you don't do this. It doesn't work. So the real question is, why do people do this? And I think what all of this that you've observed, Logos, shows is a few things. The first thing it shows is that I'm right, that the left was subverted by corporate and deep state interests, the labor movement, the anti-war movement, going back to the 60s. And the late great singer-songwriter Phil Oakes talked about this before he committed suicide. And he's like, yeah, we don't need all these different subcultures. We need a monoculture to push back against this. And of course, that's what they didn't want. The elites, the bourgeoisie, they didn't want this. So, they got rid of it. And you can put it this way, right? If they weren't doing this, how would it look any different than we have it now? Well, it wouldn't, right? I think that's the big, first of all, that's the big takeaway right here. This is the evidence, strong evidence that my theory is correct, that the American left, because we need to first define what does the left mean in American politics. Well, pretty much for all of history until 1960s, it meant pro-labor and anti-immigration. And that's what people don't understand. FDR, for example, had been criticized for having very strict immigration controls and not allowing refugees from, Asia or Europe during Japan and Hitler's and not Germany's rise to power, and other things. FDR's base was the American South, right? I mean, they weren't going around doing these self-destructive things in order to please some imaginary client base. They were like, no, we need to protect the working class, and we need to keep the borders carefully patrolled. So that's a right and a left-wing thing right there, right? The borders is more of a right-wing issue today, and the left is more of a labor issue. But they did both because those both go together. And now they're on opposite sides of the political spectrum. So that's mission accomplished, right?
Well, yeah, it's funny how the left is like, quote, pro-labor, but because they've untethered the labor conversation from its grounding, right? So let's say that you want to make stronger unions. Well, how do you make stronger unions? You have to be able to have a force that forces companies to come to the table, right? Well, how do you do that? Well, the company can't just uproot its factory and move to their country if it thinks the workers are getting too uppity. That's number one. So you have to control international trade. The left's basically given up on that issue, right? Globalism is great. If you don't like our stuff being made in other countries, you're just a xenophobe. The global order is inevitable. We are all the human race. Okay, well, great. So if laborers want big enough labor protections for factories, then whether they're environmental, worker safety, pay, benefits, if it gets too expensive to make stuff here, they're going to Vietnam. Great. Bye-bye unions. And at that point, the left says, oh, well, those Vietnamese, we just got to love them. They're doing the jobs Americans don't want to do. How many times have you heard that one recently, right? Okay, that's number one. They can't just up and move stuff everywhere. Okay, number two, you can't have companies import so many scabs that they drown out the people trying to negotiate. It's like, if we can replace you tomorrow with scabs, we'll do it. It was interesting. I think it was like New Mexico. There was some state that was having like a K through 12 like strike budgeting issue. And even the K through 12 schools, the state's just like, we're just replacing all the Filipinos. Go retire. Bye. Don't need you. Then they did. And it was like crazy to watch. We've talked on numerous streams about the Whole Foods heat map, right? There's all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah.
It's not as if like I'm pro-labor and pro-immigration. I think both of us would agree that to be pro-labor, you have to be highly regulating both immigration and international trade. You can't do one without the other.
You can't. And so what all this really means is there's a crisis of identity on the left, right? The Democratic Party from, the populist movement begins on the left and the Democratic Party in probably the 1880s. So from the 1880s until the 1960s, that's what it was. And even right up to Clinton in the 90s, they still pretended to be about that. They weren't. I mean, Clinton was deregulating everything, but they still pretended to be about that. And Obama is masked off. They no longer pretend. I mean, Obama bragged that he didn't need to curry the white working class vote in the Midwest to win a second term. He bragged about that. So, what exactly was the point? What is actually, so a thing is what a thing does, right? What I think is happening here is that the bourgeoisie, Wall Street, whatever you want to call it, is so the Industrial Revolution basically took away a lot of jobs from people. So how did you fill those jobs? Managerial work, the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy soaked up all the unemployed people because, machines were doing work that people did, right? So, well, what do you do with that? Well, then you have a new class, the bureaucratic class, right? And then that just keeps growing because, the bureaucracy expands to meet the needs of the bureaucracy, right? So in order to break up the left, what they did was they're like, okay, working class people are white men, and white men are bad. And so you create this urbanite elite of bureaucrats who don't have any connection to real working class people, and you then pivot them against. So they might say on a protest, I'm pro-labor, I'm anti-capitalism, but everything they say and do is targeting what they think are white men, but what are actually the working class, because that's what they were conditioned to think by all the propaganda they were taking. And so what they ended up doing was, thing is what a thing does. They ended up doing exactly what Capital wanted them to do, because Capital did a transposition in their mind, where if you view someone's mind as an attic, a brain attic, and then you have an object. You have an object, a little object here called the working class. They made a copy so good that they called men. They called whites. They called white men. And it was so good to the working class that they could just switch it in every single part of this person's brain attic. They didn't even notice the transposition was made. And now that it's made, they can't stop thinking in this way and are just going off a cliff.
Yep.
All right. So, I mean, that's that. And that's, I think, one of the big problems here. Now, here's the thing, though. There are people, I think, who are still principled pro-labor, anti-war types. A good example would be Max Blumenthal from the Gray Zone. He's
yeah.
So there are still people like that on the left, quote unquote. There's not that many. And I think the problem is those people need to be identified, and they need to be, worked with to actually build some sort of solution, because it's just not working the way things are now. I remember in 2011 when Occupy Wall Street was at its height, and everybody was like, "Oh, well, capitalists are trying to buy us off with tokens. They're going to put women and black people and minorities in charge of corporate boards and CEOs, and we can't fall for that, guys. We have to still fight capital." For example, there's a documentary called The Corporation. And The Corporation, it's a good documentary, by the way, was put together by, whoops, that's the wrong thing here. Put together by Mark Akbar and Jennifer Abbott. They're both woke. It's like, you literally took the tokenism. You were in 2003. You're like, we don't want tokens in charge of capital. 2004. So we're going to have, don't fall for it. Fast forward 20 years, they fell for it. And now they're doing the corporation's bidding. I mean, I called this 20 years ago, 10 years ago. It's like, this is going to happen. They're going to totally buy the tokens, because that's all they care about. They don't have principles.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it's funnily enough, this goes back to Veblen, of all people. The issue is what the left wants its relationship.
You're muted, Logos.
Sorry about that. I hit a button on accident. What the left wants its relationship with capital to be. If they want capital to keep efficiently churning forward and making more stuff and making more, quote, progress, then they're going to want tokenized stuff, basically, because capital is fundamentally good. It's fundamentally making the world a better place. It's just that it has some stuff that needs to be wrinkled out and ironed out. If you think that capital is fundamentally bad, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. Things we think are progress are actually coming at a very, very high cost that can't last forever. The latter is increasingly becoming more of a conservatively minded approach to things. I can't tell you how many, quote, left people I've talked with online that think it's just nihilistic, pessimistic, like thinking. They're like, I could never think that life, is zero sum. I could never think that, we're not making progress when we look at all the new technology and vaccines and refrigeration and all the stuff that we've got. It's like, obviously, we're heading toward a sci-fi utopia. It's going great. And it's like, that's it. What do you do with those people, right? And so, like Max Blumenthal, when he's worried about war and capitalism, where they intersect, the police state, all that stuff, it's like, who's he going to work with, really? Because I don't think the right's going to take him, because the right has been pretty co-opted by social stuff to a large degree. I don't think there's a lot of room for him there. And the left certainly is going to take him, because a large chunk of the left and left discourse, like whether it's Destiny, Ezra Klein, you name it, there's a whole massive faction on the left that has pretty good parlance with the power in the DNC that is fundamentally pro-capital and pro-progress and pro all sorts of stuff that, wouldn't like what he's saying. So I'm a bit black-pilled on this one.
Musk's America Party. Just kidding.
Oh yeah, that'd be hilarious. Well, yeah, Musk's party. Yeah, that'd be great for an anti-capital guy like Blumenthal. Could you imagine?
No, I'm just no. But the point is here, what we're seeing is that the left, when it was still in the United States, okay, in the U.S. context, I'm talking about the world, just the U.S. here. In 1960, before the Vietnam War, it was pro-labor and anti-war. That was it. That was it. Real simple. And then it got real complicated, and then everything fell apart. That was not an accident. Logos, if you know what a diseconomy of scope is, I guarantee you the deep state does too. And
yeah,
I think they probably knew this would happen, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they were like, hey, let's have all these diseconomies of scope to just completely nuke the the pro-labor anti-war movement. And what do you know? It worked, right?
Yeah. Anybody could have predicted it.
Yeah, but few did. So I think what I'll just say, I'll just sum it up. All of this is diseconomies of scope, Logos. That's the single, wrap it up in a bow right there. You got anything else to say?
I mean, you just said my line, so what else can I say?
Well, Logos, we had a new record today, 115 likes. They must have come out, or watches, live views. They must have come to see you.
Well, thanks everybody for watching.
All right, this is Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.